Good. We have people joining us. Hello, WHA Panzer. Stay safe as well. Good to see you guys. I think let's get underway. Apologies, we're starting late today. I've just been recording the podcast, this week's podcast with Dr. Greywell, which will be uploaded on Friday, as usual. So I've just, that one was quite a long one, so apologies. We've overrun. So I'll start the show just in a second then. When we're just about set up, we're just about ready to go. So just bear with me 30 seconds and then we'll be off. And great to see you guys online. Right, let's get underway. Hello, welcome back to Perspectives. On today's show, we'll start with a warning shot from the international community relating to this has actually specifically come from the UN experts. They've told Canada, in no uncertain terms, that a Sikh activist on its soil faces credible threats to his life. So we asked what credible actually has to mean before Canada actually moves beyond statements and does something about it. And then from Indianapolis in the States, we're going to look at a car rally that should have been a straightforward show of community strength. Instead, it's become another example of just how badly the Khalistan movement, is losing this PR war in certain situations, with Sikh faces getting sadly folded into a very different, very damaging story about crime and immigration fear. And then in Punjab, the Akal Takht has ruled there's no place for yoga inside a Gurdwara. We'll explain the reasoning, what it tells us about where religious authority still holds the line in Punjab. And we'll look at a quiet, patient campaign to rewrite Punjab's own history books, from a disputed temple near Amritsar to Hindi-only classrooms, and ask who benefits when that next generation grows up not knowing the difference, because of course it really matters. And then we'll close today by letting one of India's loudest Hindutva broadcasters make our argument for us, as he actually defends live pellet gunfire on protesters by invoking Jawaharlal Nehru's own order to shoot 400 people in 1946. All this and loads more on today's show. And of course, at the end of the show, we'll take a look at loads of great comments. So do stay tuned for that. And actually also, as I did say in yesterday's show, if you've got any comments directed at me, specifically, I know you're all chatting amongst yourselves on in the live chat, but if you've got any specific questions you'd like me to address, try and put them in capitals so I can actually see them. Then they actually do sort of stand out a bit. In fact, what I'll do is I'll just make your comments a little bit bigger so I can actually see them a little bit easier. Makes me easier for me to see them as well. So anyway, let's get on with the show. And as always, loads to get through. Indeed, right, Canada. Here we go. So we want to start today with a story that actually deserves more attention than it probably will out there in the public domain. United Nations experts, independent human rights specialists operating under the UN Special Procedures Mandate, they formally urged now the Canadian government to provide protection for a Sikh activist that they say faces credible ongoing threats to his life. Surprise, surprise, we've been here before, haven't we? Now, this is not any sort of vague, ambiguous concern. There's no diplomatic hedging that we're talking about. This is credible threats to life being stated from a UN mandated bunch of experts aimed squarely at Ottawa. In other words, there's no room for doubt in what the UN has just actually not just asked, but told the Canadian government. So, of course, we have been here before. We've spent a lot of time on this show specifically tracking what Canadian authorities have started, even themselves, calling transnational oppression. They do recognize it exists. Of course, that pattern of Indian state, directly or through proxies, reaching across onto Canadian sovereign soil to literally eliminate people that it considers threats. Case in point, by Najjar. And his assassination in Surrey in 2023 is really the case that has forced this conversation right out there into the open. Even here we are 3 years later talking about it. So what this latest UN intervention tells us is that more than 3 years later, the underlying threat is still there. It has not gone away. It just simply moved on to its next target. And the international community is having to say so again out loud. So, and here's what actually makes this particular intervention so significant. The United Nations special rapporteurs, as they're called, they don't issue communications like this lightly. There is a process, and it's a big process, and it's a very official process. Evidence has to be presented, the threats have to be assessed as credible and assessed by independent experts with no political stake in the outcome. And then the resulting letter goes not just to the country from where the danger originates, India, but of course to the country that's supposed to then be providing safe harbour, Canada in this case. So the question that this raises isn't actually about India as such anymore. It's actually about Canada, Ottawa. So what does credible threat to life, certified by the United Nations, actually have to look like before Ottawa actually does something about it, before it does offer that concrete protection, rather than just another round of quiet diplomatic notes? Well, we've raised it with India, we've been there before. And as I say, we have asked this question a lot on this show in the context of the RCMP, the Royal Canadian Mounted Police's own public statements linking the Indian government to serious criminal activity on Canadian soil, including homicide, murder. But the pattern by now is depressingly familiar. There's overwhelming evidence, there's strong language from officials, and then, well, what actually changes on the ground for the people living under this threat? Canada has taken real, if slow, steps. The transnational repression training, for example, that we talked about in California, is showing that at least other jurisdictions are starting to take this a bit more seriously, and they are building institutional capacity to recognise and respond to transnational repression. But recognition of it isn't actual protection. A UN letter isn't protection in itself, but it does help. But ultimately, it is beholden upon the government itself to protect its own citizens. So every time one of these warnings surfaces and nothing visible follows, it tells us a lot. But more importantly, it tells the people doing the threatening, India, exactly what they need to know. That the cost of trying is still lower than the cost of succeeding. And that calculation is just what keeps this happening. They know they're just going to get away with it because the Canadian government are just not doing anything about it. And that is what got Bhai Hardeep Singh Nijjar killed. So the United Nations has now put its name to the claim that someone else is in danger of being next. Maninder Singh, in this case. So, yeah, we're going to keep an eye on this. And, I obviously hope that Maninder Singh does stay safe. But if anything ever does go wrong, there will be blood on the Canadian government's hands. They have been now warned by the United Nations. It doesn't get more serious or higher globally than that. So anyway, let's move on. Indianapolis. I love this. Whenever I see these car rallies, I think these are fabulous to see that sea of flags, the sea of Khalistan flags, just as far as the eye can see down the road. I mean, it's absolutely wonderful to see. In fact, it's so wonderful. Let me share you a video. I'll put a video of it in the background as well that you can have a look at whilst I talk to you. Here you go. I'll put that on loop because I'll let it play as I'm talking to you. So this, of course, is about the Khalistan referendum. And this story is less about what India or Canada is doing to the Sikh community. It's actually something a little bit more uncomfortable. It's about what the Sikh community is doing to itself. So footage has been circulating from various car rallies. This is just one of them. And I'd say it's just wonderful to see. Well done, guys, for such a fantastic turnout. It really is great to see this. I mean, literally, as far as the eye can see up that highway, there is just this wonderful sea of Khalistan flags. It is the kind of visible high-energy show of community presence, of Khalistan activism that's become a familiar feature right across the diaspora, certainly in North America and in Canada, and to a limited degree over here in Europe. Now, anyway, but things like this on their own is not a problem. But the problem is what's happening around it. And this is quite concerning because even Surinder Singh on his show, on his other show on our channel, he's brought this up as well because I've noticed it as well. I've seen some quite concerning social media posts. And it's worth highlighting just what's actually going on out there around in the context of these, because something needs to be addressed and pretty soon about it. because these events are producing a very damaging public narrative that we need to stamp on quickly. It's one where Sikh faces at rallies like this are now getting swept up into a broader fear-driven story about immigration and crime that obviously has nothing to do with why these rallies exist in the first place. So you've got to think about the context and the environment where these sorts of rallies are happening. Right across North America at the moment, immigration anxiety is running high. And it's not a rational anxiety. It doesn't even need to be. It's just driven by headlines. It's driven by algorithm-fed outrage. Social media feeds this sort of anti-immigration, anti-immigrant sort of sentiment because that's what engages people. But also by politicians who've discovered that fear is a much more reliable tool to use than hope. And then into that environment comes this, a loud, visible rally with unfamiliar faces, unfamiliar language, unfamiliar symbols. And that's exactly the kind of thing that gets misread by people who then are already primed to be afraid of something they don't understand. And once that misreading happens, and once it happens once, it sticks. It becomes the frame through which they see the next rally and the one after that. So ultimately, this is the fear, is that any white person, let's say a white American who has never heard of Sikhs or doesn't know what a Sikh is or certainly has never heard of the Khalistan cause, they suddenly see a 5-mile row of Khalistan flags, all with brown faces. They're gonna immediately think, this worries me. I feel a bit intimidated. What's all this about? Is there an invasion? This is the narrative that's building, certainly obviously in the right wing, but even amongst the general population. If they don't know or understand what this is, there is immediate fear. Fear breeds negativity. So this is why we need to talk about this and address this and try and work out what the heck do we do about this? Because of course, we must continue this. This is great to see. So we mustn't stop organizing these things. Visibility really matters. And these events genuinely do build solidarity within the community. But it's got to be worth at least talking about. This visibility mustn't be without a PR strategy. And right now in this climate, it's absolutely essential that a PR strategy is, or at least addresses, this issue I'm talking about. Because if the public's dominant association with a rally like this becomes something to be nervous about or to fear, rather than something to be just curious about, what's that about? That is a PR problem. That's a messaging problem that the community just has to address, and address it quickly. So what would help? What is the solution to this? Well, a few things that definitely worth thinking about. And if you ever talk to the organizers of these things, once even on social media, drop comments in just to tell them, look, we need to address this issue because I'm seeing it increasingly on social media. It's all about education. And first of all, for example, pair events like this explicitly, publicly, and repeatedly with those things that the Sikh community does very well, and it does cut directly into that fear narrative. Things like the langar, the free water, the food distribution to anybody passing by. Keep a really happy demeanor, a smile on your face, but go out of your way to be friendly to anybody beside you. Cars waving past, just wave at them, just be really happy and positive. You've got to break down the fear barriers. That's what really matters. And charitable outreach, obviously, that's a bit more of a longer term thing. But charitable outreach associated with rallies like this makes a big impact as well, because people fear what's unfamiliar. So the fastest way to make something familiar is hospitality, not volume, not 5 miles of cars. I mean, that's great, but that doesn't breed positivity or hospitality. It breeds fear in other people. In other words, it's important that all Sikhs who are associated with these things, they go out of the way deliberately and individually to be warm, be approachable to any ordinary bystanders who do show up to watch or drive past, rather than treating the rally as some sort of internal community moment. Because the people who are around you, who are not part of you, but are around these things, aren't the audience that you're performing for. They're the audience you're trying to win over. You're trying to get their support. And then thirdly, get ahead of the narrative rather than reacting to it. So a rally, when you announce one of these rallies with obviously clear, simple, public, just announce it with public explanation across social media, anywhere where these things are happening. Just try and educate that community, the wider community locally, what it's about. Do not fear it. Explain what it's about. Please join in. We will be delighted to treat you to a bit of langar or some water or something, but just try and educate and include others rather than exclude. And that really is the issue. So, and if these rallies are announced much better rather than just within Sikh community circles, then it will do a huge amount of positive PR work that I think is currently lacking, which is why we're seeing an increasing number of social media posts being very negative about these things. But as I say, all that is not being negative about this. Because as I say, these things are great to see. They are wonderful to see. They're such a positive thing to see. But as I say, they've got to be aligned with a much more sophisticated PR campaign to include the general public as well, at least break down those fear barriers. Stay safe. You said they can change the tactic. They don't mind car rallies can be replaced with PR. Well, it's all, you don't have to do one without the other. It's both. I mean, you can certainly have these car rallies. And as I say, please, more of these car rallies because they are so visible. I mean, every car that drives past, they're all saying, what's that about? But as I say, it's got to be associated and aligned with a parallel campaign of PR, just so that all these other drivers understand what it's all about. So, Sikh Jedi, you can play devil's advocate. Of course you can. Do you think Sikhs and Indians in general might sometimes overlook their own responsibility to hold the government in India accountable instead of fleeing? Oh, that's a huge topic, Sikh Jedi. I've got a lot to get through today. A quick answer to that is, well, the question is, should the diaspora move back to India to try to change things? Well, a lot of the diaspora have actually fled literally for their lives. Obviously, many have done it for economic reasons, but many have actually fled literally for their lives. If they go back to Punjab, they're in real trouble. So a lot of them actually daren't go back. So hopefully that addresses at least the broader issue of your point. I don't have time to go in wider detail on that. So hopefully that gives you at least some sort of idea. But ultimately they do. They do hold the Indian government to account, not within India. They have to do it outside, which is obviously less effective. But actually it's more effective in certainly aligning Western governments to understand what's really going on in India, therefore holding India to account. And therefore, it's Western government pressure that's probably the only way the Indian government are ever going to change, because certainly they've got such a tight hold over their domestic audience. The domestic audience is never going to do anything about it. So anyway, hopefully that sort of answers your question. Right, so I must move on because it's going to be another long show otherwise, as these things always tend to be. I want to talk about yoga and yoga in Gurdwaras. So yeah, this is all about the Jatadar, the Akal Takht, Jani Kuldeep Singh Gargaj. He's taken a very clear public stand against this growing practice of these yoga sessions being organised inside Gurdwaras. Now, his position, and it was delivered actually as a very formal appeal to Gurdwara management committees around the world, is very, very clear. It's very unambiguous. There is no place for yoga within Sikh religious tradition, and it shouldn't be permitted in langar halls, divan halls, or indeed any part of a religious complex. So, but it's also, you've got to be quite precise about what he actually said, because it's not a blanket objection to physical health or exercise. Of course, that is, such an ingrained part of being what a Sikh is. It's all about well-being. The Gurus taught us all to maintain our health and physical fitness, obviously to be the best soldiers that we can be, should we ever get called upon to protect the oppressed, etc. But what the Jatadar was saying, he was explicit. Oh, sorry, I beg your pardon. I'm still showing you that video. There you go. Sorry, I get so carried away talking to you, I often forget to press buttons. So I do apologise about that. Anyway, so what the Jatadar was saying, look, he's no quarrel with anyone practicing yoga or indeed any other forms of exercise in their personal life. But what his objection specifically was much narrower and actually obviously much sharper. Gurdwara premises are there for religious activity, for congregation and Gurbani. Full stop. That's it. Breathing exercises, modern yoga, of course, are well-intentioned, but they do not belong inside a Gurdwara because that space has a singular purpose. And so this ruling comes after the Sikh youth organisations and religious bodies have already raised objections about this. that these yoga classes have been run inside a lot of Gurdwaras. So the Jatadhar statement it's not surprising that it's come, but it is a well-needed and a timely, decisive intervention in a debate that obviously has been going on. So actually, I've been sort of seeing it simmering away for quite some time on social media. So his intervention actually has been provoked by a lot of rumbling, let's say, amongst the community. But ultimately, why does it matter? Beyond just simple exercise classes? Well, because it's actually about a much bigger, much more sensitive conversation that we talk a lot about on the show. It's about the slow blurring of lines between Sikh institutions and, of course, the broader state-encouraged push towards a homogenized Hindi Indian cultural identity. Now, yoga itself is not the specific issue, and I'm not going to tell you that yoga is evil. Of course, it's not. But ultimately, yoga has, in recent years, become very closely associated with a specific political and cultural project, and that is one that treats yoga as a symbol, a very important symbol of Indian, and by that read Hindu soft power, promoted, of course, from the very top of the Indian government and Hindutva. So when yoga, which is now so symbolic, starts appearing inside Gurdwaras, even with, it may well be totally innocent intentions, it does become part of that overall pattern that the Akal Takht and the Jatadhar is completely aware of. Institutions built to protect distinct Sikh identity are now just being very subtly, but very deliberately nudged gradually, and often well-meaningly, towards Hindutva, towards absorption into something that is not pure Sikhi. So they're blurring the lines. The Akal Takht, drawing this firm line, but of course still protecting personal freedoms of any Sikh, essentially to do what you want outside the Gurdwara. But it is a good example of how that institution is supposed to function. We have in some times in the past been critical about the Akal Takht, but some of the diktats have been coming out have actually been very good in recent times. And so what the Akal Takht is doing right now, it's functioning well because it's not policing individual lives, but what it's doing is protecting the boundaries of our shared sacred spaces, like the Gurdwaras. So whether every Gurdwara management committee around the world does fall into line, we'll see. But as I say, that central diktat is now out there, and it will be interesting to see if yoga is hopefully it stops being taught or practiced within the Gurdwaras. We'll see. Let's have a quick dip into the comments. Hello, TC. Nice to see you online. WHO Panzer's there. Stay safe, of course, there as always. Sikh Jedi, what have you got to say? I'm just quickly having a look. Excellent point, Angus. It doesn't belong in Gurdwaras. It is a disrespectful thing to do to undermine Sikhs. Sikhs are not Hindus, and that is the key. And this is the real core of so many stories that I talk about. Sikhs are not Hindus, but this is what Hindutva is trying to do. They are trying to absorb Sikhs into Hindutva, or certainly into Hinduism. Anyway, right, let's move on. And this is really following along the same sort of themes. And it's about two stories, actually, that sort of belong together because they do follow the same underlying agenda. And this is the quiet, patient work of reshaping what the next generation of Punjabis grow up to believe about their own history, this battle over Sikh history. So I'm just going to quickly just remind you guys, if you do have questions for me specifically, and you might not have been on earlier on when I started the show, if you've got a specific question for me that you want me to address from the live comments, put it in capitals, keep it as short as possible because I don't have time to read 3 lines, but just keep it short, sharp, and in capitals, and at least it'll hopefully catch my eye as I talk. So just so you know. Anyway, so let's start with one of these stories. Anyway, there is a plan backed by the Bhagwant Mann-led AAP government in Punjab to build a temple dedicated to Love, Kush and Matasita at the Ram Tirth site very close to Amritsar. Now, on the face of it, that might sound a pretty unremarkable act of religious accommodation. It's just another Hindu temple. But this guy, a Sikh preacher, Jani Jagtar Singh Jachak, I hope I pronounced his name correctly. He's an international voice. He served as an ambassador of peace for the Universal Peace Federation. He's laid out a very detailed historical challenge to this whole idea, and it is worth taking seriously. So I'll show you in the background, I'll show you this chap, Gianni, speaking. There you go. So his argument is that the site was not always considered sacred to Ram at all. And according to Sikh historical accounts, before the 1700s, it was actually just a pond. It was actually built up and promoted as a Ram-era pilgrimage site by 18th century Mughal officials in Lahore. Specifically, actually, as it turns out, to rival the growing prominence of the Golden Temple. So in other words, on Jachak's telling, this guy's telling, the ancient Hindu holy site story is nonsense. It's not ancient at all. It was manufactured just a few centuries ago as a piece of political theatre aimed squarely at Sikhs. So he also points to independent historical and literary sources, and actually nothing to do with Sikh tradition, which place the real Valmiki, that's the birthplace of love and Kush, hundreds of miles away. Actually, in fact, in Uttar Pradesh and Madhya Pradesh, nowhere near Punjab at all. So again, you start to see the agenda. And even Indian court findings, he says in his speech, have separately concluded that Valmiki was born into a Brahmin family, which undercuts the idea of being some kind of shared ancestral figure for communities who were historically barred from even reading the Sanskrit text that he'd be associated with. So the whole story that has been fed to the masses, the Indian masses, is completely and utterly nonsense. So now I can't go into huge historical detail in obviously the time that we have here. And in this specific case, the government funding the temple happens to be a Punjab-based secular AAP administration, not the BJP. So this has actually come from the AAP. But this is actually why it's significant in its own right. In other words, we need to talk about it because Johnny Jachak's underlying warning that he's talking about here, it's not really about one temple. It's about the pattern. And it's about the pattern that he is seeing repeating. Political leaders, and it doesn't matter which party they represent, treat Sikh sacred geography as flexible for building religious infrastructure that conveniently mirrors that broader Hindutva project of reasserting a Ram-centered Hindu Rashtra version of Indian history. And that's the same project driving the renaming of streets, the same project behind school curricular changes that we've discussed before in the past. In other words, it's all part of this overall agenda to Hindify Punjab and impose essentially a fake Hindu backstory to Punjab that never existed. It was manufactured. And he points out that Prakash Singh Badal did something similar when he was around, building the Maharishi Valmiki temple, likewise for the same sort of political gain. Now, the names on the building plans change, but the underlying dynamic, that Punjab's sacred landscape being quietly reshaped to fit someone else's national story, doesn't. In other words, we've got to be aware of what's going on because it is very quiet, it's very subtle, but there is a very clear agenda to Hindify and de-Sikh Punjab. In other words, remove the Sikh identity and the Sikh history from that sacred land that is Punjab, that originally was the Sikh Empire. So it does actually then go into the second half of this story. And it's actually, basically, it's the same story, but a little bit more direct. Schools. And I've talked about schools and what goes on in Punjab schools quite regularly now. Because we've heard a lot of concerns. And this is not corroborated, but it does point to an overall sort of agenda that we do know is very much out there. And it does support many, many other stories that we hear from so many different sources. It's all about Punjab schools being deliberately staffed with Hindu-only teachers. Again, and I've heard it from so many sources on the ground that, of course, it has to be true. You know, why would anybody not tell the truth about that? And it is part of that broader pattern that apparently even extends down as far as Tamil Nadu as well. And again, when I talked about Tamil Nadu in the past, that we've had the same story. And Tamils have, again, the Tamil dissenters themselves have gone public saying, look, why are our schools being Hindified? I mean, is anybody surprised? Of course they are. You know, it's the same methodology is being rolled out across the whole of India by central government because they want to Hindify India. Anyway, but ultimately, it doesn't matter what the precise numbers are. It's about the strategic overall logic that's behind this push. And it doesn't, you know, you don't need to be a conspiracy theorist to take this seriously. And if you want a culture to drift generationally towards a particular national identity, like the Hindu Rashtra, the Hindutva idea, then the classroom is obviously the much more effective way to do it than even a temple could be. Children spend more hours in school than they do in the Gurdwara. And what they're taught there, and by whom, shapes to them what normal looks like and what looks like to them for the rest of their lives. In other words, that is how important it is. Stay safe. Barclay, Angus, Hindutva is there too. Stay safe. Hindutva are everywhere. And what I would, and you guys who aren't regular watchers but are watching now or subsequently, just go on, just Google the Caravan and Sciences Po, the RSS map, and you will see they've done a huge amount of work to actually try and map where Hindutva and RSS are globally. Berkeley College University Music School. I mean, yes, you say they are literally everywhere. Gabru, nice to see you. Thank you. Nice for joining us as well. Nice to see you anyone. So anyway, so back to the story. So if we put the temple and the classroom side by side, then of course you start to see how important schools are for the next generation of Punjabis, because it means that educating children means they do grow up believing something else that they might learn in the Gurdwara. Because as I say, they're only in the Gurdwara every now and again, but in school, they're there most days a week and most daylight hours. So it is very concerning. As I say, we need to keep an eye on this. We talk about it regularly because we have to. And there has to be a huge amount of pushback against this, because it is a very, very dangerous situation, because this is something that very large-scale political movements have really adopted, in certainly over the last sort of 50 years. And one that springs to mind is the European Union is another prime example, and I wouldn't be surprised actually if India is following that model, where the European Union, which is a massive, hugely resourced propaganda campaign, literally billions of dollars behind the EU agenda, ensured that schools are filled with textbooks all supporting the idea, the concept of a European Union. We're seeing it in many other areas, like the LGBTQ plus whatever agenda. All these movements realize that schools are the place to change society, and therefore they flood schools with their agenda, whether it's through the teachers, the teaching materials, the textbooks, whatever. And this is what's happening all over India right now. They've taken this playbook because it works, because it takes 20 years, but 20 years, the older you get, and I can tell you from experience, the older you get, the faster time passes. And 20 years actually is nothing in a big movement, in a big political movement. So you can generate and indoctrinate a whole generation into your line of thinking if you control the schools and therefore their minds. So they grow up thinking Hindutva is great, Hindutva is the future. That is why it's absolutely essential to address these points now, because complacency is too dangerous, because they're playing it very slowly, very subtly. As I say, it's the old boiling the lobster alive or boiling the frog alive. You don't realize until it's too late, because it's so slow, the change. And this is the same across all fronts in India. The whole Hindutva battle, they know they're playing the long game, and they're winning that long game because they're very careful and very intelligent how they're doing. This is why we in turn have to fight back. Obviously, we're fighting for Khalistan, which is the ultimate solution. But as we fight for Khalistan, we've got to certainly recognize the methods that Hindutva are using. And they are insidious. They are attacking our children, your children in the Punjab. So be aware, address it, and deal with it as best as we can. Push back on it. Anyway, so yeah, I want to talk about another video. Let me just, you've all heard, you remember, guys, we talked about Chanakya dialogues. Oh, where have we gone? The Chanakya dialogues, there's that ex-Indian officer, Indian army officer. Was he captain? Anyway, whatever it was. He was an Indian officer in the Indian army. And he had the Chanakya dialogues, where he still today just rants on in complete Hindutva overdrive. He hates Sikhs. He hates Khalistanis particularly. He was the guy. Yeah, Major Gaurav, you're absolutely right. He's the guy. He was a major. You're right. Thank you, Stay Safe. He's the guy who, gosh, was it 2 years ago? He actually said, and And he encouraged India, the Indian state, to employ and pay the mafia in America to kill Sikhs, to go into the houses and kill them. That is actually what Major Gaurav actually said online in public. His show didn't get taken down. I bet his show isn't demonetized like ours, but you do not get more criminal. I mean, that actually is a criminal offence here in the UK. I couldn't say something like that because that is inciting violence. But of course, he got away with it. Anyway, why am I talking about the Chanakya dialogues? Well, because there's another one, and I'm going to talk about this in a moment. This is, and he's going to talk. The reason I'm going to talk about this is this story: the cockroach protesters who actually got shot with pellets. But this is, beg your pardon. This is the guy. There you go. Sanjay Dixit. I don't know if any of you guys have come across this guy, Sanjay Dixit. He's just another Hindutva broadcaster, but he runs the Jaipur dialogues. And like the Chanakya dialogues, he has a massive number of subscribers. In this case, he's got over 2 million subscribers. And he's just put out a video, actually this past week, defending the Delhi government's use of pump-action pellet guns against those CJP protesters. Of course, that's the crackdown that I've talked about over this last week or so, and showed you all that disturbing footage of some of the injuries. And in fact, as I say, here you go. Even the BBC picked up on this. It is totally shocking. I mean, this guy was a democratic protester, and he gets sent to hospital with wounds like this. I mean, here in the West, when I look at this, it's just, I shake my head in disbelief that if I went out to protest on my streets, if I ended up looking like that, there would be, there would be an uprising. Or would there? There's another rabbit hole to go down. But anyway, ultimately, so I'm going to play you in the background now. This is the guy. Here he is, ranting away. That is Mr. Dixit himself ranting away. But interestingly, it is worth hearing what he actually says in this video. And it's all in Punjabi. I had to use a bit of technology to translate it. Because ultimately, it tells you everything what you need to know about how this violence that we're seeing in that is justified after the fact. So anyway, this guy's position is that rioting is not a fundamental right, that freedom of expression under India's constitution is explicitly subject to reasonable restriction in the interests of law and order, and that pellet guns represent nothing more than what he thinks is proportionate limited force, obviously, but then being used to disperse what he calls an unlawful assembly. Well, it's interesting, different perceptions, isn't it? And he does go further. And he says no criminal cases against protesters should be withdrawn. Remember those FIRs that they demanded should be cancelled, otherwise the protest would continue. But yeah, he says that those FIRs should not be withdrawn. No compensation should be paid to the families of those killed. And he's vowed, apparently, get this, he has actually vowed personally to challenge in the Delhi High Court if the government shows what he calls weakness by backing down. And he says it's the same weakness, if they do, that Modi's government showed when it eventually conceded to the farmers' protests. Interesting. So in the video that actually really we need to sort of have a closer look at, and you can go watch it yourself if you speak Punjabi. But the bit in the video that is really important is this. He attacks Rahul Gandhi for platforming a pellet gun injury victim. I think it was this same guy, actually. And then he talks about that, but then pivots, apparently without any sense of irony, to Nehru. And he talks about Nehru back in November 1946, when he was serving as India's de facto prime minister. Nehru ordered police and the Madras regiment to open fire on protesters in the Naga Norsa area of Bihar. And when they opened fire, they killed about 400 protesters, demonstrators who were demonstrating in response, apparently, to the Noakhali riots. But anyway, this guy, Dixit, then says in the video, approvingly, that Nehru later wrote to Padmaja Naidu expressing satisfaction about it. But his point in the video is that Rahul Gandhi, as Nehru's descendant, has no place to criticize state violence against protesters today. So let's just work out the logic of that. This prominent Hindutva commentator defending live pellet gunfire on unarmed protesters today chose to make his case by reminding his 2 million Indian audience that the Congress dynasty's own founding prime minister once ordered troops to shoot 400 protesters dead and was glad about it. So he offered that up as the defense of today's crackdown. So really the logic of this, I mean, you actually, when you work out the logic of what he's actually saying, you cannot have a clearer illustration of the mindset that I often have to sort of point to. It's the mindset where state violence against democratic dissent isn't a scandal to be explained away, it's a tradition to be proud of, regardless of which party happens to be holding the gun. In other words, he thinks because Nehru did it back in 46 and killed people, that justifies the state to do it today. Essentially to almost, as it fortunately not kill, but certainly used massive violence against political protesters, a democratic protest. That is the real issue at hand. It's utterly outrageous. Anyway, but as I say, the Jaipur dialogues is this guy, and it's just another Chanakya dialogues. I mean, we've been there too many times, and as I say, what comes out of the mouths of these guys, it appeals to that Hindutva indoctrinated domestic audience in India, because they are washed with Hindutva news through the Gaudiya media. So they are a very receptive audience to hatred and division and extremism that is spat out by people like this guy. And as I say, if this guy was broadcasting from the UK and the Chanakya dialogues, Major Gaurav, if he was broadcasting from the UK, he would have been closed down within 2 days. But because they are in India, they can get away with it, because the Indian government certainly isn't going to close them down, which in itself tells you all you need to know about the Indian government and the state of Indian democracy, and of course the state of the Indian rule of law, because there are very clear incitements to violence in many of these videos. It's quite a regular thing. They are quite often inciting violence against minorities, particularly against Sikhs and particularly against Khalistanis. And who does anything about it? Nobody. Their channels remain monetized. Never mind not shut down, they're still monetized. When we on this channel, every time we've held India to account, we got warnings and then we got demonetized. And touch wood, hopefully we won't get closed down. We try not to be. But that is what we're up against. This huge propaganda machine that just indoctrinates millions of ordinary Indians. And it's deeply, deeply tragic. Again, another reason why the only answer to all this, the only way this will ever stop being effective in terms of the damage it does to the Sikh community and others, is to break away, is not be a part of India anymore. It is to set up Khalistan, that sanctuary where all minorities can find safety away from stuff like this. Anyway, let's move on. Oh, it's time for our comments. Hooray! Let's zip into our comments. Let me have a quick look through the live. We've got Jaipur diarrhea. Yes, indeed. Absolutely. I think that's probably the best way of describing it. WHA Panzer, did you listen to Angus just now? They want American mafia to kill Punjab. Yes, this was actually true. I didn't make this up. It was, as I say, it was a couple of years ago Major Gaurav, he actually said online, I think it's still up as well if you want to try and find it, he did say publicly, and it went around social media because it was so outrageous. He did actually encourage the Indian government to pay proxy criminals, including the mafia itself, to kill Khalistanis in America. I mean, again, it's just outrageous. That is a shocking mockery of democratic protesters, says TC. Indeed, again, I couldn't put it better myself. What else can we have a look at? Major Gaurav, yes, thank you for reminding me of that. I think that's probably the comments for now. As I say, if you've got any questions for me, do drop them in the comments in capitals and try and keep it as short as you can so I can actually read them. Where are we? WHO Panzer, I would like to see that clip if you have it some time. Is that, I guess you're talking about the Major Gaurav. I'll see if I can dig it out. so it might take me a while to find it, but I'll see what I can do for you. Anyway, right, let's move on to our post video comments as opposed to the live comments. The Sikh Jedi, I think you're still online, Sikh Jedi. Nice to see you. Thank you for joining us once again. I think you're in the live comments. Sorry, forgot to press the buttons in my excitement again. I think the Sikh Jedi is in the live comments, stirring the pot, as we say. So do keep it up. Always good to see some healthy discussions going on. Keep it polite, of course, please. It's good that they're speaking out for Bandi Singhs, but this still alludes to separatism and is a bit wishy-washy. Well, yeah, okay. Of course, the Bandi Singhs is an issue that we do talk about, and we don't even talk about it enough, because it is, again, another absolute legal outrage. And are we surprised? No, we're not, because it's India. But it is a legal outrage that there are these gentlemen who have served their sentences for, well, I was going to say crimes committed in the 1980s during the defensive position of Sikhs in Punjab. But they've served their terms and they're still in prison. They will still not be released. I mean, why is the Western democratic world not up in arms, metaphorically speaking at least, about this? Why is Modi still having his hand shaken by our leaders right across the Western democratic world when the Bandi Singhs, for example, are still in prison? There is no rule of law in India that is recognizable by any Western democracy. It's absolutely outrageous. But the wishy-washy statements, Sikh Jedi, we try not to be wishy-washy. The Khalistan movement is actually, I have to say, it has in the past been wishy-washy, but it is now funneling up to a much more coordinated campaign, which is actually why it is proving so successful at the moment. So I wouldn't say it's wishy-washy. James Singh. Congratulations, Angus. The Indian IT nerds are in the comments now. This means they're running scared. Keep up the good work. Yes. Well, God bless you and your family too. Thank you for that, James Singh. Yes. Interesting. There have been one or two people have popped in from the Hindutva side, have made some interesting comments, which actually I love. It is good that we do see a counter narrative. I always encourage people, if you don't agree with me or us or the show or things that we talk about, let us know, but don't just send a rude insult, because all we do is we laugh at it. If you want us to engage, explain, why you disagree with us. Explain, just give us some information, give us some facts, give us some links, all the usual stuff. But ultimately, of course, the IT cells are very, very active. We know they're massively resourced by the Indian state, particularly by obviously the RSS forces. And it is their job. All they do every day, over and over again, is they just go online and just fill social media. They fill comment columns like ours with their nonsense. Now, fortunately, remember Callum Abroad? He was a chap that we spoke about a while ago. Poor Callum, I don't think he's been, his show has not been banned in India, unlike ours. It's only a matter of time, probably. But he has been inundated with IT cell comments, really bad ones as well. I think he was quite shocked by it. We haven't, to the extent, because we are banned in India. So they've sort of left us alone, because the IT cells, a lot of them actually are primarily trying to still indoctrinate, not people outside of India. They're trying to indoctrinate those still in India who might start to be persuaded by shows like ours. So they tend to just target any shows that are still active in India. So that's why we don't get quite so many, which actually is a good thing, bad thing, but it means we're just not swamped with nonsense and rude comments like others are, say. SSC Tin. Nehru had offered Khalistan to Master Tara Singh back in those negotiations around partition. Yes, it was, but it wasn't quite as simple as that. And do watch some of my podcasts. We've actually gone through in great detail with Dr. Graywell everything that happened around certainly the 1940s, the lead up to 1947, and then, of course, post 1947, the drafting of the Constitution. It wasn't quite a simple black and white discussion as it turned out. But ultimately, yeah, I mean, was there an opportunity at partition for Khalistan? I actually don't think there was. The more research that I've done, the more discussions I've had with people who know these things and have done the research, I actually don't think, and I think was it a couple of podcasts ago, there were two big sticks in the room. There was the Hindus and there was the Muslims. Those were the two big parties in the room. And somewhere in the middle, this tiny little stick was the Sikh community. And an even smaller stick was the Christians, the Jains, etc. So, of course, those were the biggest sticks. We're always going to win. So, when you balance out the dynamics of those negotiations around partition, it really was most unlikely that Sikhs would ever get anything. I mean, the only thing they'd ever get would be anything that would suit the other parties. In other words, they would be used as pawns, as in fact they were in the end. They would be used as pawns in negotiations, but that's about it. They would never get what they actually wanted, which was their own home state. Why would they? Why would the Hindus or the Muslims give any land away to the Sikhs? Because they all want it. And that, in my opinion, is why actually it doesn't, all these discussions about being offered Khalistan, I think are just academic. I don't think there was a chance in 1947 that Sikhs would have got Khalistan, because the parties involved all had their own agenda, and none of those agendas included the interests of Sikhs, sadly, because the Sikhs were just too small, demographically speaking. So anyway, but thank you for that comment, SSC10. It's interesting. TC, hi TC, you're online as well. Nice to see you on both iterations of our comments. Dr. Grail, India is still colonized. Yes, it is. But one wonders whether the tail's wagging the dog. This whole system needs addressing and rebuilding anew. Khalistan is, it's the only solution. Watch my podcast. As I said, I've just finished recording my podcast this week with Dr. Graywell before this show. And it will be uploaded on Friday. And we do actually talk about this. Dr. Graywell has come up with a new framework that India should be actually looking at in terms of its governance. It's decentralizing Indian governance back to the provinces, back to the states. But ultimately, and I think I even raised this point in the podcast. Hi, Abtar Dillon. Nice of you to join us. But ultimately, as you rightly say, TC, the only real solution to all this is, of course, Khalistan, because ultimately, we're not part, well, I say we, I'm sort of projecting myself into Khalistan now, is that Sikhs just don't belong in India. I mean, some do, if that is your choice. But ultimately, Sikhs and Khalistan is only belong in one place, and that is Khalistan itself, because that is the only way that they will ever be free. They will ever be free of this persecution. And the same applies to any other religion, including Hindus, and particularly lower caste Hindus, who still are prisoners within the Indian system. So anyway, let's move on. Truth is life or death. Kal Swaraj is the future. Hindus cannot govern. Well, Kal Swaraj is the future. As I said, Khalistan is coming. Hindus cannot govern. Well, they do. They do govern, but they govern in the most undemocratic way. And that is why it's failing. That is why there is so much instability in India, because ultimately they didn't have the power to rule India when the British were in charge. And the British only held it all together through brute force, through the power of the British Empire. But then when the British left, what did they do? They handed the British deep state handed the power of control over the Indian subcontinent to the Indian deep state, the elite, the Brahmins. That is why India today still is colonized. It's never been decolonized. When we get to the 15th of August, Independence Day, Republic Day in India, it's ironic that India celebrates Republic Day, because ordinary Indians celebrating that, all you've done is you've just swapped one colonial ruler for another. Congratulations. But they don't get it. That's the irony of the whole situation. Ordinary Indians just don't get this. This is the tragedy of India. And actually why I suspect it's all going to fall apart, as many others do. Anyway, Dharmender Banins, thank you for joining us. Long live Khalistan. Nice to see you online as well. Thank you for your comment. Let us continue with these. Hobo. This made me laugh. A white man dreams about creating an ethno-national religious state in the Republic of India and lectures about colonialism. What a bigoted idiot. Well, where do we start with that one? I'm chuckling because I love comments like this. Thank you, Hobo, for joining us, and thank you for your comment. I do dream about a state of Khalistan. I don't describe it as an ethno-religious state, because it's not an ethno-religious state. It will be run along the lines of Sikh, like the Sikh Empire was. But as I always have to remind people like yourself, the Sikh Empire, which forms the perfect example of what Khalistan will be, the Sikh Empire was not primarily imposing Sikhi or Sikhism upon its people. People were free to practice whatever religion they wanted. It was not a theocracy in that sense of the word. It's quite the opposite. It was totally the opposite. The whole point was all about freedom of expression, freedom of religion, freedom to practice basically whatever you wanted. That was the difference. And a bigoted idiot. Now you see, again, this sort of insult doesn't work because I'm not a bigot. Because like a Sikh, this is why I align with Sikh. It's like, would you call a Sikh a bigot? A Sikh is brought up to treat everybody as equal, to make, if you're, for example, a Hindu, to make you a better Hindu, etc. Is that bigotry? I align with that, so therefore I'm not a bigot. I might be an idiot. That's a whole different discussion. That's up to you to make up your mind. But certainly I take immediate, I'm not offense, I'm not offended, but I take immediate argument with the word bigot. I don't think I'm a bigot. And I'm not lecturing about, well, I suppose I am lecturing about colonialism, but hopefully it all makes sense. Hopefully you understand what I'm talking about when I talk about colonialism. So anyway, but I think you were online, Hobo, in the live show. Was it yesterday? Anyway, come back, come and join us on the live show. It's always good to see you making some comments. Gamone Grail is there every day with a Satsria Cal, and it's lovely to see you. Thank you, Gamone Grail. Thank you for your comment. Always much appreciated. Avatar. Oh, you're online as well, Avatar. I think you certainly were earlier. Yes, you're still there, Avatar, I think. Nice video title. Thanks, Angus, Dr. Grail. Hope you both have a great weekend. See you Monday. Well, what day is it today? Tuesday. Well, I'm seeing you Tuesday. Thank you. I had a great weekend. It was sunny here in the UK. It was baking hot. In fact, as it still is, it's about 30-something degrees. You can see my bare legs. It's still shorts day. It's still madly hot here in the UK and certainly in London. So, oh, good heavens. And I say, it's almost taking off the jacket day. I did consider it today because it's so hot. So anyway, but thank you, Upton. Nice to see you there. Jessica Singh, Bhai Guruji, Chadi Kala, Khalistan Zindabad. Oh, it's always a great comment. Lovely. Thank you for that. Chadi Kala. We are all in Chadi Kala. Fantastic. And then Truth is Life or Death. Khalistan Zindabad. Narinda. Khalistan Zindabad is the final one. Indeed. Gosh, we're there already. In fact, we've even got 4 minutes left. So we are actually bizarrely early. We, as I say, I always do like to finish the show on a Khalistan Zindabad. So thank you for that. So yeah, you guys, thanks for being online. It's always nice to see you on live. What day is it? Tuesday. So yes, we will be back tomorrow, God willing, at 5 again, live at 5 tomorrow, Wednesday. Don't forget to put your comments also after the video, the live video after it's uploaded, because I do need those videos to then talk. Those comments to then talk about in subsequent shows. So don't forget, not just the live comments is always appreciated. If you can dip in, just maybe make a comment, whatever. But also don't forget to let me know any stories that you pick up online, because of course I do try and trawl social media amongst the Sikh groups for any sort of snippets of stories or rumors that I can then go away and research and tell you guys about. But of course, you guys are in a much better position to do that. So please do, as many of you do, thank you. Please just send me an email to message@satellotv.com if there's anything that you would like to bring to my attention. As I say, it's important that you do, because the whole purpose of this show is I am but that conduit where you guys feed me stuff, feed me information. I can then bring it back to the wider audience. I am that sort of that funnel of which we hope to spread. Khalistan Chadi Kala. WHO Panza, what you just said. Great, Brother Angus. Chadi Kala. Absolutely. Chadi Kala Raho, stay. It's the best of circumstances. Nice to see. Indeed. Well, I think we'll draw the show to a close now, guys, unless there's anything else you want to ask me. I have to ask it very quickly because I'm going to wrap things up. We've got about 2.5 minutes of time if there's anything you want to know. But ultimately, yeah, as I say, that is pretty much it for today. Don't forget, we've got the independence independence referendum in Indianapolis on the 15th, or is it the 16th? 16th of August. So if you guys are around in Indianapolis, make sure you turn up, take your family, take everybody there. Don't forget to engage with those around you. As I said in the earlier story, make sure that you tell everybody, white faces, other communities, explain to them what it's all about. Don't let them feel intimidated or fear. Or if you see anybody wondering, what's that all about? Don't be afraid to go up to them, talk to them, explain to them with a smile on your face in full of Chadi colour. Explain to them what it's all about and why they should actually join in. Invite them to join in into the rallies, etc., because that is what is making the Khalistan movement so powerful, so successful, and it is what's pushing it over the line. So anyway, that's it for the day, and have a great night, everybody. God willing, I'll see you guys live at 5 tomorrow. Have a great night, and I'll try and find the off button, but until then, have a great day. See you guys.